How important was mindset for you? How important is it in general when it comes to pushing ourselves out of our comfort zones and doing something new?
One of the findings in peak performance aging is that aging is not just a physical process. It's just much of a mental process. And people want to know, where do I start? It always starts with mindset. The first thing you got to do is change your mindset and explode that sort of traditional mindset around aging. The best way to get rid of a mindset is to design a quest where if you make it to the other side of the quest, that old mindset cannot survive.
We're teaching in negotiation that you can't be curious and angry at the same time. Because if you're 31% smarter in a positive frame of mind, then by definition, when you're in a negative mindset, you're dumber. Then you get into a downward spiral and you make bad deals and you feel even more self-righteous about bad deals. Curiosity would have kept you out of that if you could be genuinely curious and just really want to know and really want to learn because you're fascinated by what's going on. The strategic advantage of that mindset just works across the board in every aspect of your life.
What does it take to do the impossible? What does it take to level up your game like never before? What does it take for individuals, organizations, for even institutions to achieve paradigm shifting? Nothing is ever the same again. Breakthroughs.
Our mission is to decode the neurobiology of flow and cognitive peak performance. Access the minds of maverick scientists, groundbreaking innovators, and world-leading experts to understand what it takes to achieve ultimate human performance, so you can feel your best, perform your best, and accomplish your boldest goals. I'm your host, Rian Doris, and together with best-selling author Stephen Kotler, I present to you Flow Research Collective Radio.
We're going to take today a deep dive into some really cool things, a deep dive into the science behind aging and how to de-escalate the effects of aging. We're going to talk all about flow and negotiation, and we're going to talk about how to get what you want out of life. I could skip the introductions. These two individuals and gentlemen that we have need no introduction, but I want to actually focus and highlight a little bit on what they've done. Stephen Kotler, 11-time best-selling author, founder and executive director of the Flow Research Collective, one of the world's leading experts in human performance. We're also joined by Chris Voss, who is a renowned author, speaker, and negotiation expert. So there's so many things I could say about Chris, but he served as the lead FBI international kidnapping negotiator for years and now runs the Black Swan Group, which is a consulting firm that teaches individuals and businesses the art of negotiation. And he's the author of Never Split the Difference, which is on everyone's mantelpiece if they want to learn how to negotiate better and more effectively. And he's widely regarded as one of the top negotiation experts in the world. It's going to be a lot of fun. Stephen, for those who don't know what NAR Country is about, how would you describe it to them? And what does the title mean? It's quite an interesting and a different title. What does it mean?
NAR Country is a book about peak performance aging. It's about what's actually really possible for all of us in the second half of our lives. And the title, NAR, is action sports slang. It's short for gnarly. And it's defined as any environment that is high in perceived risk, high in actual risk. Country, any landscape or terrain. And so NAR Country, you put it together, you get a landscape that's high in perceived risk and high in actual risk, which is a pretty great description of our later years. And as we'll probably get to today, it's also a pretty great description of the gritty mindset sort of required to thrive during those later years. But I want to add one thing or two things that really sort of kind of underpin why we're here today and why Chris is such a great person to have this discussion with. As we'll get to, two of the things that are crucial for peak performance aging are empathy and social relationships, the quality of our social relationships and empathy. Peak performance aging is impossible without either of them. And I always tell people, I am great on peak performance. I do nothing on interpersonal relationships. That's not my strong suit at all. So maintaining quality relationships into our later years is crucial, and discussion, negotiation, conversation, all of those things really, really matter. One of the things that you don't hear, you always hear, robust social ties are really important too, for positive psychology, for peak performance aging, etc. nobody really tells you how to maintain those robust social ties, especially in the face of difficult conversations. And I think Chris is best in the world at that. So I think that these things dovetail, our work dovetails really nicely inside the world of peak performance aging.
Yeah, I'm curious to pull on a thread there that you mentioned. I want to bring Chris in as well. You spoke about mindset briefly there, Stephen. We want to talk about empathy and social connection, and I want to hand the mic over to Chris in a bit. But how important was mindset for you when you decided to take on this challenge, right? To learn to park ski at 50. A lot of people would say that this is not something that a sane person would do, that it's a little crazy, that it's dumb, that it's dangerous, that you can't teach an old dog new tricks. How important was mindset for you, Stephen? How important is it in general when it comes to pushing ourselves out of our comfort zones and doing something new?
All right, so I'm going to give you a high-level view of peak performance aging, and then I'm going to talk about mindset for a second. But let me get one thing out of the way, because nothing's going to make sense if we don't do this. So the traditional idea about aging, which most of us are really familiar with, it's what's called, what I like to call the long, slow route theory. It's the idea that our physical skills, our mental skills, they decline over time, and there's nothing we can do to stop that slide. And it turns out that's not true at all. It turns out that what we now know is that all the skills we used to think that declined over time, both mental and physical, we now know they're use it or lose it skills. So if we never stop using these skills, training these skills, we hold on to them and advance them far later in life than ever before possible. Now, one of the findings in peak performance aging is that aging is not just a physical process. It's as much of a mental process. And people want to know, where do I start? It always starts with mindset. The first thing you got to do is probably change your mindset and explode that sort of traditional mindset around aging. And the mental physical connection is never stronger here. A positive mindset towards aging. I'm excited about the second half of my life. I think it's filled with thrilling possibilities. My best days are ahead of me. That will translate to, and this isn't just one study, there are dozens of studies that show this now, an extra 7.5 years of healthy longevity. So if you are morbidly obese and have a crappy mindset towards aging, it is more and more that you switch your mindset than you lose weight. One of the reasons I think the GNAR style quest I embarked on, like if you talk to people about how do you change mindset, there's really great advice. Mindfulness, paying attention to the present moment, sort of embracing change, watching your language. There's a bunch of stuff, but mindset is sticky, man. It gets in there deep. And I find that the best way to get rid of a mindset is to design a quest where if you make it to the other side of the quest, that old mindset cannot survive. So I had I've been studying this stuff for 20 years, but it changed the fact that there's still some of that mindset of old that had sort of infected me. But as I was learning to park ski, like somewhere around the time I learned like a nose butter 360, or one of the more difficult tricks that I learned, whatever my older mindset about what was possible in the second half of my life, it was shattered, it was gone. Because here was like actual physical proof that not only can the old dog learn new tricks, he learned really difficult, supposed to be impossible for like 11 different biological reasons, physical skills. In my 50s, it blew that old mindset up. So it's not that I was even immune to it. I wasn't immune to it, and I've been doing the research. But one of the reasons that kind of quest is really useful is that it just explodes our old mindset, and nothing works better for changing, interior mental attitudes than proof from our own life.
It expanded your belief about what's possible. So, Chris, I want to ask you, how important is mindset for you? Right? I've heard you say that a positive mindset makes you smarter. How does the mindset that you have as a negotiator help you create better outcomes? And what type of mindset do you need to be influential?
Yeah, well, it's the critical cornerstone. I mean, and everything else would be built off of it. A positive frame of mind it affects your ability to think. I mean, the happy secret to better work is a TED talk. I'm getting a mental block on the author, a Harvard psychologist, but he says you're 31% smarter in a positive frame of mind. Now, a couple of years ago, I'm in the midst of a negotiation with a negotiation counterpart that I don't trust and I don't like and I know is lying to me, but we're staying in the deal because there are other benefits to the deal. But it's eating at me, the fact that this human being is not going to tell me the truth. And I'm doing a rehearsal for the negotiation in my head, and I'm not coming up with the answers that I need. I'm in a negative frame of mind. And I stopped myself in the middle of it, and I thought, I'm lucky to be in this negotiation. The only reason why this person, this company is so persistent with us is because the Black Swan Group is ridiculously successful. We got the best negotiation method on earth, and we're helping people change their lives all the time. And so this is a success problem. So I'm actually lucky to be faced with this negotiation. And the minute that I changed my mindset on it, then the answers that I needed came to me. I knew what I needed to say, and I could put it to rest. It just instantaneously in a moment. So your ability to function is going to be governed, it's going to be heightened, or it's going to be held back by whatever mindset you're bringing to it in a moment. There's just no way around that. And I think I learned a lot of that from Stephen's earlier book, The Rise of Superman, when mindset changes didn't increase anybody's physical ability, but their ability to perform exploded by 10x. So mindset is a cornerstone that everything else flows from.
Yeah.
Do you mind if I jump in with that? We're just talking in general about a positive mindset, a little bit of optimism. So this is one of the stronger findings in peak performance aging. It's one that showed up back in the 90s, and it sort of really shocked people. There was this big study done on the Sisters of Notre Dame. They're sort of a national Catholic organization, and they're very into education, they're very into science, and they were very interested in successful aging, healthy aging, and they want to know what factors contribute to successful aging. And the advantage with the sisters is they had to write an autobiographical essay at age 20 or so when they entered the sisterhood, and there was family records, there was medical records, they got yearly checkups, and once they got in the study, they measured everything. And they started asking questions: what contributes to the sisters who lived a really long time versus those who died younger, that sort of thing. And one of the things they realized is they could analyze their essays, on average written at age 22, for level of optimism and level of linguistic density. So optimism and basically like sort of intelligence, education, were the two things they were looking for. And they could use them to predict what decade these people would die. So literally your level of optimism at 20 could predict when you die. And on average, people who were optimistic at 20 lived 10 years longer. So even like moods are very early in life, it really sort of carries on. So like mindset is one sided thing. Optimism sort of feeds on that even more.
What about curiosity, Stephen? That was one of the biggest takeaways for me in this book. And I see Chris's ears perk up a little bit because I want to be asking you some of these questions as well, Chris. You write something really profound early on in the book, Stephen, and you said that when you were thinking about trying some of these ridiculous, outrageous scheme tricks, that you said, there's a gap between interesting, this stuff that has piqued my curiosity, and interesting, this is stuff I should try. And that typically fear fills that gap. Now, as you age, that fear is because the distance between your ass and the emergency room is a lot closer than it used to be. Now, I laughed out loud when I first read that, and this book made me laugh a lot, by the way. I'm curious about this notion of curiosity, and not just inviting it into our lives, but seeking it out in all that we do.
Wait a minute, hold on. Stephen Kotler, stand-up comedian. You said his book made you laugh. Is that it?
Many, many, many times. Many times. Part of the reason is because he tells you the stories of all of the bumps and bruises along the way, and he has a really cool way of doing that. So I want to know, right, how important is it in helping us, Stephen, overcome fear, or that big challenge, or even for us to want to take it on in the first place? And Chris, I'll bring you in a second. I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on this.
Curiosity and anxiety are actually two sides of the same neurochemistry, right? A little bit of norepinephrine and we're curious. Too much norepinephrine and now we're anxious. Most mammals actually cannot feel like curiosity and excitement and anxiety at the same time. Humans, a little more complicated brain, we can. But if, for example, when they do work, this is a horrible example, but when they do work trying to keep animals calm in slaughterhouses and things like that, as they're leading the cows into slaughter, one of the things they do is they have objects that cows will be curious about. because just simply by being curious, anxiety goes away and it keeps out the calm. Humans could be the same way. So I tell a story in the book. I'm terrified of heights, which is a really funny quality in an action sport athlete, but like I was born that way. I spent a decade as a rock climber thinking it's going to go away, thinking I can get past it. Yeah, I can work with it. I can negotiate with it, but it never actually goes away. And when you ski at Mammoth, both their gondola and one of their chairlifts just go over like huge valleys and can be crippling and bring on vertigo with me. And like, you don't want to get to the top of the mountain to like be shaking and freaking out already. So what I do is I try to get very curious about the line I'm going to ski while I'm going up the lift, right? And to take it one step further, if you look at like really early work on mindfulness is not just about paying attention to the present, it's being curious about what just happened, what's going to happen next, right? Even if it's the quality of your breathing or sound meditation, if you want it to really work for you, what you're trying to cultivate is not, I'm listening to music, or I'm listening to sound, it's, I want to know what it's going to do next. So you get all that subtle little nuance. And I am guessing that if we talk to Chris about high pressure negotiations, there's a huge advantage to being curious about the other person than almost any other attitude. But I'll shut up and pass the mic over to you, Chris.
Curiosity as a superpower, it just keeps showing up in all these different places, which is, is like a clue. I can remember, I think it was Elon Musk's brother talked about how when Elon was a kid, he'd read several books at the same time, looking for the same things popping up in completely different circumstances. And then he'd know that it was a universal truth. And you see that about curiosity. I mean, you see it popping up all over the place. And Derek Gaunt, who's the best coach on my team, phenomenal negotiator, a good friend for a long time, wrote a book on tactical empathy and leadership called Ego, Authority, Failure. Like Derek's mantra is stay curious, stay curious. And he talks about this all the time. And then you look at Nassim Nicholas Taleb's book, Anti-Fragile. Curiosity is an anti-fragile characteristic, which is beyond resilience, because anti-fragile is the things that grow from disorder, from trauma, post-traumatic stress growth, which is what we all hope happens to us. It's not useful as a teaching mechanism because traumatic stress also crushes people. But to reach the heights of what you are requires traumatic stress, and curiosity helps you navigate that. We're teaching in negotiation that you can't be curious and angry at the same time. Because if you're 31% smarter in a positive frame of mind, then by definition, when you're in a negative mindset, you're dumber. And then you get into a downward spiral and you make bad deals and you feel even more self-righteous about bad deals. And then afterwards you go, how could I do something that was so stupid? And curiosity would have kept you out of that. If you could be genuinely curious and just really want to know and really want to learn because you're fascinated by what's going on. I mean, the strategic advantage of that mindset just works across the board in every aspect of your life.
So
Chris, can I ask you? I thought I'm going to cut you off because this is a follow-up. But my wife and I were having this discussion about how in tense situations, the difference between a couple, we've been together for 17 years, we've been together for a long time, and like I get into a tense situation with my friends, I'm asking questions. Hey, why are you so mad? What's going on? Where's this coming from? It seems like, right? All the good questions that I've learned from Chris, in a sense. Or is it ridiculous to think that? Right. There's the muddy question. But I found that, with my wife, with my father, with my mother, with these longs where like curiosity would be my best friend. It would head off, a disaster, right? And a disaster I could see coming, and yet it's really hard to access that in the moment, especially when you've got these kind of relationships that have been repetitive. You've drilled behaving one way for a really long time. How do you go about switching that? How do you go about changing that? Is about practicing in less emotional situations and bringing it in. What do you think about that?
Yeah, well, we fall to our highest level of preparation. So small stakes practice for high stakes results. And you don't even actually have to get the practice in if you can rehearse it in your mind. Now, I'm lucky enough that everybody on my team, and we use the negotiation skills and we use curiosity with each other all the time. And we actually teach the curious inflection. Like you can say, why did you say that? And the inflection kills you. But you can say, why did you say that? And to even put that tone of voice out, it lands well with the other person, but it also reframes your own mindset. Like you can override the default mechanisms, which are negative, by just changing your tone of voice yourself and making it a point to be curious in your tonality, and you've suddenly injected something for both sides that's advantageous.
So, Chris, I'm going to come back to this question, but there was something that you said there that I'm even more curious about. You're the go-to negotiation guy, the communication and negotiation expert, and what you intimated was that your skills are also use it or lose it skills.
Yeah.
Are they perishable? And how do you make sure that your skills stay sharp?
Completely perishable. And maybe a fairer term is they can go dormant, because perishable makes it sound like they're gone, that you can't retrieve them. Mm-hmm. And dormancy means that you can wake them back up in my layman's definitions. So I know that if I don't use the skills enough, they'll erode. And I also know that if I could just work my way through my fears and get back into using them, they'll come back to me very quickly. So me and my team, we think about it all the time. We practice it. I'll throw it out there when I don't even think that there's a reason for doing it. Like one thing that we do all the time, we've got sort of a standard formula for getting a free suite hotel upgrade. And I throw it out there every time just to get to practice it, just to see what happens, even if I don't think.
Do you want to share that with folks? How do you do that?
Is this one of the takeaways?
I'm sure Stephen's going to love it. He'll want us to share this, right, Stephen?
Absolutely.
All right, so there's three parts of this, and it's anticipation. First step is, you get to the hotel, you check in. By the way, this was designed by my son, Brandon Voss. He came up with this, and it annoyed me that he was always getting better rooms in a hotel, and I was a boss, and I was paying the bills, and he's in a nicer room than I am. So that annoyed the heck out of me, and I finally asked him. So what's it look like to the other side? Which also plays to empathy that Stephen talks about all the time. I mean, we completely agree on empathy. So you're walking into a hotel. What's it look like to the other person? You look like a prop. You look like a demanding human being who wants something for nothing. So you walk up, you got a reservation, you give the person your ID. People can't multitask, so you have to wait until they found your reservation. And then you emotional anchor. And you look at him and you say, I'm getting ready to ruin your day. And you got to let that sink in. And you just watch them go, oh, God. Because, like, if they work in a hotel, they're flashing back on all the horrible things. Like, do you got a goat's head in your suitcase and you want to do ritual sacrifice in a room and we got to clean that up? I mean, they faced every kind of crazy, bizarre thing, what God's name you getting ready to do? And you let them react, and then you let them give you the signal to go on. And it's usually like, all right, what is it? And then you need a little more, proactive empathy, if you will, tactical empathy. Say, I know I'm getting ready to sound like just another self-centered, demanding traveler who wants something for nothing. All right, so this is actually a relief at this point, because you do not have a goat's head in your suitcase. You are not going to leave, all sorts of imagery all over the room that they don't want to see. This is actually, things are improving. And they've been warned that all you're really after is something for nothing. So you're bringing them to a better place already. Now, the last hotel I did this in, the manager is 5 feet away, and he jumps over and stands behind the young lady who's working behind the counter, because he's listening to this. And the moral of this point is you can do it in front of other people. You can do it in front of hotel employees. You can do it in front of the boss. I've done it in front of the boss a number of times. And so I look at her and I go, how much trouble am I going to get you in with him if you give me a free upgrade to a suite? Because the last obstacle that you've got to deactivate is how much trouble are they going to get in? And so you ask them that because they can't proceed without having embraced that problem. Now at this point in time, you're in a great position, and it's simply an inventory issue for the hotel. How many nights are you going to be there? How many suites do they have available? Like, if I don't get a suite, I want to know for sure that they didn't have any, not that they just didn't feel like it. So I threw this out at them. The manager in the last hotel I was in said, let me check the inventory, let me see what we got. And I watch them work, and I know exactly that I'm going to get an honest answer. Now, if I don't, also, I need two more things. I know if I don't get the suite, it's because I don't have it, and I don't need them resenting me because there are other things I'm going to want before I leave, and I want to be in a good place with these people. In this particular instance, the guy's like, look, we could accommodate you 4 out of the 5 nights we're here, but in the middle of this, I don't know if you want to move. It's a problem for me in the middle of this. And I'm like, cool. I need to know what else I can get out of these people. I don't need them to be relieved when I walk away. Now, in this particular hotel, in this instance, I'm satisfied they didn't have any suites. Later that day, the manager came looking for me because my assistant had called the hotel to shorten my stay. And in looking out for me, he wanted to make sure that I was happy. They'd given me free access to the executive room that they always have where they got all the free food and all the free drinks you can get in the morning and night. They'd added that onto my hotel for nothing. And then the guy came and hunted me down and said, there's a woman named Sarah that's called us out that's trying to check you out early. I want to make sure that she works for you, and I also want to make sure that we preserve your late checkout on that day. And so it all becomes bundled into your entire treatment the entire time. And if you don't get the suite, you want to know what you can get, and you want them looking after you every moment that you're there. And that's what ends up happening.
He went out of his way to come and find you.
Yeah, the guy came hunting for me.
And the success rate is ridiculous, right? It's like 90%, something like that you talk about.
If they've got it, you get it.
Yeah.
If they've got it, you get it. I had another hotel that I did this, and the manager leaned over and grabbed the keyboard from the lady that was helping me. She looked at me, she says, I could do this, but you got to promise that on Thursday when you leave, you don't get a late checkout because we're under the gun that day. But all the other nights, I can give you the suite. I'm like, deal. Like I'll hang out in the lobby for that.
Yeah, it's an incredible ninja hack, and there's something else in there with regards to connection that I want to pull the thread on now. And Stephen alluded to this earlier. And Stephen, there's a really special person that's mentioned throughout NAR country. He plays a massive role in this story. You would have all seen him at the start trying to sort out our echoing issues. And that's your skiing partner, the absolute legend that is Ryan Wicks. And I'm a little bit biased because I love Ryan. I know Ryan. And I was struck by this, Stephen. His role as your confidant, your cheerleader, your sounding board. How important was Ryan? And how important are social relationships in general in helping us flourish and achieve our goals?
So let's start with just social relationships and peak performance aging. Just a quick overview. You'll hear again and again and again that maintaining social connection, first of all, it's the foundation of positive psychology. We teach it as a peak performance basic, meaning it's really hard to generate the amount of energy you need on a daily basis for peak performance, for flow. If you're not maintaining robust social connections, there's a big energy penalty. But once you move into the second half of our life, people with stronger social connections, better resistance to infectious disease, better prognosis when facing a life-threatening illness. In most of the studies you see, when they look at robust social connection versus isolation over periods of time, you usually see that the people with robust social connection, their survival rates are like 50% better. So it's a big up. You get better, less depression, less loneliness, more resilience, more coping, less risk of cognitive decline, and so forth. And one of the things that was interesting for me is I'm not a particularly social person. I am mostly introverted. I like hanging out with my wife. I like hanging out with a handful of close friends. So if you look into like long-lived communities, so-called blue zone communities, they can spend 5 or 6 hours a day maintaining their social relationships. That's a tremendous amount of time. I don't have that kind of time. So to do that, I want to be getting into to get all those benefits in a shorter time frame requires group flow, because then you get all the neurochemistry, the social neurochemistry for connection, but in less time. Group flow absolutely requires the right training partner, with which Ryan and I were. And there's a handful of characteristics that I think define the right training partner. The first is, of course, psychological safety. You got to trust somebody. And one of the things, Ryan and I have been skiing together a very long time, and over time. So one of the things about vertigo is I can often start suffering vertigo from exposure, right? I'll be on a cliff face or something above exposed cliff, and I will start shaking, and I'll be losing muscle control, and I won't even notice it. I'll be so focused on how the fuck do I get down? I got to ski this thing. And Ryan will see it, and he'll be like, dude, you're shaking. Maybe we should back off and come back later. Like, you want a partner who's going to put your best interests right at the forefront of their mind. But there's also a couple other things that really matter. And in terms of group flow, I mean, we talk about group flow. Collective ambition is often the place you want to start. So like a shared goal that neither of us could accomplish on our own. Me learning to park ski, Ryan wanted to advance this skiing. We got farther together. That was a great place to start. But we also have similar warm-ups, similar learning preferences, right? We're both kind of introverted. We don't like learning in public. We don't mind being bad. We prefer to like do it private, away from folks. There's a thing with skiers and action sport athletes. Some folks like to get to the mountain and just like do the hardest thing they possibly can right off the bat because it gets the fear out of their system, and that's what works best for them. I'm a very slow starter. I need like 4 or 5 laps to get into my bot and get moving. Ryan works the same way. So we have both the same path into our activity, same favorite flow triggers. And I think finally, in a great training partner, the most important thing, we've all heard that the Silicon Valley saying, you're the sum total of the 5 people you spend the most time with. The moral of that, whether or not that's exactly true, but certainly like personality is contagious, right? When you get into relationships, you're going to become the other person, right? I always tell people, like, if you're getting into a marriage, if you're getting into a relationship with somebody, make sure you want to become your partner, because you will. Like, that's part of the point. So with a great training partner, Ryan and I both have the same vision. We have a similar appreciation for style and what we want to accomplish on the hill. We both want to get to the same place. And Ryan's a slightly better skier than I am, so he's a little closer, which made it very advantageous for me. But make sure you want to move in the direction that your partner is, because otherwise you're going to become something you don't want to be. And so those are the things that I think about in terms of great training partners and group flow and social flow. It makes me want to ask Chris, because you are the king of negotiating with a team, right? And so, Ryan's a great training partner because we're going into complicated, dangerous situations together, and we function a certain way. What do you look for when it's a team and a negotiation in great training partners? You look for similar things, different things, and why? Or should I not? And how, maybe, is the better question. But
well, the main thing for people that really accelerate us is just the fascination with the process. Like as soon as somebody starts to get fascinated with it, then we begin to amplify each other's attitude. I mean, it's a combination of a number of things. It's curiosity, it's optimism, it's a desire to learn, it's a desire to do good, to have a positive impact on everybody around you. And as soon as we get fascinated by it, then we're all picking up information from different locations, and we're adding to the sum total of our collective knowledge. Like Derek Gaunt is fascinated with this stuff. And he reads things that I don't read, because then we all become, maybe as I'm even thinking it through as I'm talking, we aggregate collectively, both in terms of our learning, whether we're reading something, and our experience, and when we're coming at it from different directions, and we're all different. Like Troy Smith, one of our negotiators out of San Antonio, Texas, one of the friendliest people you ever meet on the planet. Loves striking up conversations with people and discovering who they are. Jonathan Smith, and these guys, ethnically no relation, although we could call them the Smith brothers. I'm thinking about doing that next time I talk to him. You know, he's our EOS coach out of New York. He loves this stuff. At his heart, a little bit of a combative person like me, and getting out of combative relationships to, he's great relationships with people that he knows he would have argued with 4 years ago, and how much fun he's having with that. And we start trading stories, and we all begin to accelerate each other's progress because we're all having fun with it.
Chris, let's talk about the relationship in the negotiation. I'm curious about this, where we've historically been taught that negotiation is about outdoing the other side, right? It's about getting a better deal, getting one over your counterpart, that it's a zero-sum game. I'd love to hear your take on this. Is negotiation about connection, what we've been talking about, or is it about one-upmanship?
Yeah, well, if it's about one-upmanship, it's a downward spiral. I mean, you're going to make fewer and fewer deals. The deals that you brag about are always going to be at somebody's expense, and they're going to be farther and farther apart. I compare it to, and I live in Las Vegas these days now, but the way the slot machines work. Like, they celebrate a victory in a slot machine, and you only hit 1 in every 84 tries. I think they got the numbers down. You fail 83 out of 84 tries. And that's kind of the way out, one-upmanship, beating the other side, becomes. Your victories are celebratory, and you don't notice how few and far between they are. But then when you take it, when it's collaborative, when you're looking for deals that were better than anybody imagined, and you got to make them with the people that are on the other side of the table, so that the deal accelerates, so that they're more and more open to you. They review more and more critical information. That's when people are making life-changing deals on a regular basis, and they're not collecting enemies. They're collecting people that can't wait to do business with them again because everybody made money.
Yeah, so, Stephen, I want to keep pulling on the thread here. This is super interesting for me, and I'm sure the audience feel the same way. What happens when we have a great conversation? Both of you, what happens when we have a great conversation and the energy that we gain from that, right? Is there social bonding that happens as a result versus how we deplete ourselves when conversations are rooted in conflict? And Chris, to your point, should connection be our goal when it comes to negotiation then?
I think Chris and I are going to have the same answer here, because I've heard Chris give it, which is, in any flow is the best we get to feel, right? So you want to always try to aim for, I heard Chris talking, I think it was when you were talking with Tom Bilyeu on impact theory, and you were talking about how you can go from sadness to anger. If like bringing somebody from sadness to anger can be useful, but anger isn't the top, flow is the top. And I think, group flow is widely acknowledged as everybody's favorite experience on earth. Like, we take group flow over sex, over drugs. Like, we take group flow, right? It's that feeling. So if the goal in any conversation is to move towards group flow, that has to be the ultimate win, both from oh my God, there's a lot of happiness and well-being in here, but like the stuff that really matters to me, overall life satisfaction, meaning, purpose, right? That comes from interpersonal flow is what the term for, like, when two people get so lost in a conversation, that whole hours go by as group flow, but just in pairs. And by the way, back in the day, in the 70s and the 80s, when we had Csikszentmihalyi was first during his earliest flow work, especially when everybody thought flow was about artists and athletes and things like that. They found that the most common flow state on earth was two middle managers talking at work, right? Literally the most common flow state on earth was this interpersonal flow. Middle managers was because there's a little bit of risk. Like when you're at that level of middle management, there's people under you. There's usually money involved, right? And it's a little more process oriented and things like that. So there were advantages among those conversations that sort of led naturally to this group flow environment. But when you talk about flow and interpersonal flow, most people don't think, oh yeah, that was the conversation I had the other day at work where we were supposed to talk for 10 minutes, but 2 hours went by because it was so good. But there you have it. That's group flow, and that's the thing we love the most. And I think in anytime you're sort of, especially with a training partner, with the right training partner, not only getting there is important, but Ryan and I did a bunch of things, and I'm going to shut up and let Chris talk, but we did a bunch of things to make sure we didn't knock the other person out of group flow, right? So when you're in flow across the boards, the prefrontal cortex is deactivated. So you want to keep that. And if you're a good flow partner, or negotiating partner, or training partner, whatever, you're going to do everything we can to honor that in your training partner. So Ryan and I had rules. You never ask the other person while we're skiing for a question. Nothing that is going to require an emotional answer, because emotions get the prefrontal cortex active again, right? Negative emotions, especially. So you never ask them about work or home life, anything that could produce emotions. And the other thing is nothing that can get your ego involved. The minute the ego is involved, prefrontal cortex is active again, right? So we had rules on the chair that if we could talk about what we're doing on the hill, the skiing itself, or we could make each other laugh, or we shut the fuck up. And that was how we played. And still to this day, actually, how we play. And like the first rule for skiing with me is, if you talk to me about business or flow or writing or my personal life while we're skiing together, I won't ski with you. We're done. Like, it's over. Like, I won't, no, forget it. You're knocking me out of flow. And friends don't do that to each other. And Park definitely don't do that.
Yeah, well, I'm enjoying it. I'm thinking about the application. I'm understanding, how to stay on track, how things get off track. I'm projecting it into my personal and professional life, because it's all about, the quality of the connection, quality of the relationships, quality of the moment, and how do you preserve all of the above? And one of the things that I've always loved about learning from you, very layman oriented. Like, how do we do this? What did I do? And to affect this. And I think you've always been ahead of the curve on the thinking on this, because you dove deeply into this before there was any of the neuroscience out there to back it up, or before anybody had any idea what kind of chemicals were involved in, the mapping and the interaction of the prefrontal cortex and the rest of it. And the fact that the highest peak that you're taking the prefrontal cortex offline, which is completely counter to what a lot of people would want us to think. You need somebody to tell you that. So, I'm soaking all of it in and thinking about how I'm going to apply it in the stuff that I'm doing in my personal life, my relationship with my girlfriend, to my team, my friend, everybody. It's about a higher, more enjoyable state of being, which then also leads to longevity, because you're not dumping bad chemicals into your body through your neuroscience that kill you.
Yeah. So I want to just amplify that for half a second. There are 9 known causes of aging. They all tie to inflammation. That's the root of all of them. And inflammation is triggered predominantly by stress. It's a stress-related trigger most of the time. And so I just want to reemphasize what Chris just said. Bad relationships are incredibly stressful. Stress produces inflammation. Inflammation of what ages us. So that was, again, I like the quality of our relationships over time matters so much to how we do sort of late in life. And let me ask, well, I have to ask you a question, because I think I may have solved something for you, because I've been thinking about, you've been talking about this puzzle, so I need you to talk about it a little bit so we can then talk about the science behind it. But you were talking a lot about the neuroscience of why leading with no works so well, right? And I know you asked our mutual friend, Andrew Huberman, this question. I don't know if he answered it. And I don't know what his answer is, but I've been thinking about it for like 2 weeks now, since I knew this was got on our schedule, and I started, prepping for the chance to talk to you about it. And I think I have an idea. I think I figured out what's going on in neurobiology. Did Andrew Huberman actually answer it? And before I go in and we talk about this, tell people about the idea behind starting with no and what you discovered and how it's counter to the get 3 yeses in a row standard negotiation tactic and all that stuff.
Yeah, well, it stemmed off ideas on a couple of places. The giants that ideally we stand on their shoulders. Jim Camp wrote a book that just said, make people feel it's okay to say no, and suddenly their autonomy is protected, and they're more likely to say yes. And then accidentally, we stumbled in, me and some other hostage negotiators, what happens when you get someone to say no. Instead of making them feel like it's okay to say no, what happens when you actually trigger a no? And what we're seeing across the board is people feel safe and protected, and having felt safe and protected, they're more likely to proceed. And I love to tie as much of this to neurochemicals as I can. And when I sat down with Andrew, who's a wonderful human being, as you well know, and I study him probably as much as, and what he says probably as much as I study what you say. He didn't have any neuroscience to peg it on at the time, which is one of the things that I love about his approach is, if he hasn't got some solid, peer-reviewed, really good science to lay on you, he stays out of speculation as much as he possibly can. He doesn't think he's Jesus. He doesn't think that just because he said it or thought it, that it's automatically a miracle. He's looking for the people that are working miracles. So Andrew, hadn't nailed it down at that point in time that we had the conversation. We just know that people feel safe when they say no, and because we've used it consequently. And then I thought about it. When my 17-year-old said, "Dad, can I?" would say no. And then I would hear him out. So you see it in action across the board. I still don't know the neuroscience answer to it. I just know how safe it makes people feel, and consequently they're more open when they feel safe.
Shoot for a no instead of a yes is basically what you're saying.
Constantly.
I was thinking a lot about your core question. Is it ridiculous to, right? And I was thinking about why that works. And again, this may be wrong, but the reason I was thinking about it is we talked about it earlier about mindset. So if you look at the research into mindset, one of Jason Moser, who I believe worked in Carol Dweck's lab, ran a really famous study where he found that growth versus fixed mindset, the biggest difference is what's known as an error-related positivity. So when it's a very specific kind of brainwave, it's an ERP, it's a bunch of brainwaves at once. When we get a no, when we hear anything like results that we're not expecting, very quickly we get to what's known as a mismatch negativity. It's a sign that something's wrong. And it happens like 100 milliseconds, 200 milliseconds after we would hear that first no or something's wrong, that sort of thing. And the difference between a fixed mindset, intelligence, I'm born with it, I can't learn anything, and a growth mindset is not that first error signal, it's the next one. So if you have a fixed mindset, you'll get a mismatch negativity, the error, and it's really, really big and nothing else happens. Your brain actually stops doing work. If you have a growth mindset, you'll get what's known as an error-related positivity. That happens a couple hundred milliseconds later, and it's a sign the brain wants to learn from its mistake. If you have a growth mindset, your brain goes, oh, let's expend some energy and learn from this mistake, right? Now, what's interesting, and this is what I think is the riddle that Chris's thing, if you ask a question like, is it ridiculous to suppose that, is it ridiculous to expose, you first get that first no, you get that mismatch negativity. It's not what you were expecting, and you have to pause and think about it, and in thinking about the answer, you move to this error-related positivity. Now, here's what's interesting. When we get a mismatch negativity, dopamine turns off in the brain. Oh, there's an error, no more dopamine. And that's how we know we've made an error. That's why errors feel bad. It's because there's a tonic level of dopamine in the brain that's always there. And when we make an error, it just gets turned off and we notice its absence. When we get an error-related positivity, oh shit, I can learn from this error, you get dopamine. And dopamine drives focus, drives curiosity, drives excitement, and amplifies pattern recognition. So, and I don't know if I'm right, Chris, but in listening to you talk about the effect you get from these no statements followed by, ways for them to tell you why, That's my guess. The good news is all that's really, really measurable in a lab. Like this is not, we can test this idea and figure it out pretty easily. But I was thinking about it and I just wanted to float it at you. I was hoping that Andrew had answered the question so I had something to measure my guess against. But if he's punted entirely, then I'm probably wrong in my guess because he's smarter than I am in a lot of this stuff.
Well, no, I didn't. We talked about a lot of stuff. I didn't manage to get that one out of him. But of the different things that you said, and one of the critical issues in is pattern recognition. And yeah, when people say no, what we frequently see is, the follow-on thinking is as a result of pattern recognition. Now, it's not ridiculous, but here's what would work, which are people recognizing patterns, and so I think in the safety aspect, people's ability to recognize patterns increases.
The thing that I noticed that you said that really stuck with me is if you have total decision fatigue, if it's the end of the day and somebody comes to you and they ask you a question you have to say yes to, you can't do it. But if you have to say no to the question, suddenly you find the energy. So that was the clue. I was like, wait a minute. If saying no is actually giving you energy, like there's energy available on the back end of that energy is there's only a handful of sources, right? With dopamine seeming like the most likely one, which is what sort of led me in that direction and that suspicion. Okay, we've totally geeked out. That's for those who are neuro geeks. I just had to do that because I don't get to talk to Chris all that much, and I wanted to talk about that a little bit. Hassan, I hope you get back to you so you can get us back on track.
Absolutely. No, I think we all nerded out and geeked out over that. There's something to follow up with, Andrew. But Stephen, this snippet from the book, it's something that really stood out for me. It was a really, really profound part of the book, and I'm sure you enjoy this as well, Chris. You wrote that if we can figure out the thing that makes us feel the very best on this planet, we can use this information to steer, right? We can use it to help us solve life's ultimate puzzle. The fact that life is so short and, as Pablo Neruda says, the forgetting so long. And I don't mean solve in a metaphorical sense. I mean solve in the only sense that matters. Those things to which we say yes, those things to which we say no. The very algorithm that determines the quality of our days. I'd love for you to talk about this. How do we find the things that can help us determine our yeses and our nos?
So it grew out of the notion that, you have a limited amount of time and there's a whole bunch of filters you can put on your life. But one of the filters that people forget to put on their life is their favorite feeling in the world. And I don't just mean activities. So what I mean is your feeling. I get certain feelings skiing, but it's particular kinds of, there's stuff going on. I get certain feelings. Laughing with my best friend is on top of the list. Hanging out with my best friend is good, but laughing with my best friend is very high, right? Or my wife. Those are very high on my list. And the whole point with it is if you can make a top 10 list of your best experiences on Earth, why would you say yes to number 27 or 28 or 29, right? So I use it as a way to filter what I say yes and no to. If it's in the top 10 sort of best feelings on Earth, yeah, I'm much more likely to say yes and no to. So there's a whole bunch of different ways I filter my time, but that's one of them. And I think this is super important in peak performance aging because in general, there's a lot to do, right? All those use it or lose it skills are trainable, but there's a lot to train. So time management becomes a very important thing. And this is sort of a time management tool. And, for me, powder skiing or skiing is the best feeling, I get on Earth. And so literally in pretty much any conversation I'm having, there's a voice in my head that's saying, is this going to help you ski more or ski less? And that sounds ridiculous, but that's at the top of my list. And so it's a thing that I filter everything through. And I just think it's useful to do. And I always tell people, if you're trying to determine this list, man, use your own history as a guide. You know what I mean? Figure out those things where you've gone really far out of your way to get to a feeling, or you keep coming back to it, right? And I think that those are great places to start. But we tend to think about a lot of our no's when we're trying to like figure out time management. And I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm not going to do this anymore. And you can do it that way, but it's hard to motivate yourself. Or I'm not going to do this. That's difficult. Whereas, oh my God, this is my best feeling on, or how hard am I willing to work for the best I get to feel on the planet, is pretty damn motivating.
Do you know what those things are for you, Chris? Is it clear for you?
I'm running it through my mind right now as an intentional practice to start implementing right away. I mean, for me, having somebody create a great outcome in a negotiation is phenomenal, or hearing about the fact that they created a great outcome. So it's one of the reasons why I'm glad I'm on this conversation now, because Stephen's given me a ton of ideas of stuff that I'm going to go after.
I want to ask you about an accusations audit, Chris. A really interesting concept, and I want to explore it a little. Can you explain what this is for everybody, how it prepares you for a negotiation, and why it's important? Because I think it's really relevant given what we're talking about today. And
this is one of the most proactive things that we do in a black swan method, which is, deactivating the negatives in advance and predicting what the negatives are going to be. And it just started laying it all out on the table at the very beginning. And, we're going back and forth as to exactly what part of the brain this hits. We discuss the brain and its activities very much more so in layman's terms. But it's a head-clearing exercise for yourself and for the other side. And what I really want to do is clear your head so that the negativity that might be there, making you dumber, getting in your way of seeing patterns and opportunities and possibilities, I want to clear all that out in advance as much as possible. It's probably the single most effective and the most implemented tool. And so what is an accusations audit? I'm going to make an audit of all the things, the accusations you might make against me in advance. And I'm probably going to lead with all that. You're probably wondering whether or not you're wasting your time. You're probably thinking I'm trying to pick your pocket. You're probably thinking that I'm being greedy. You're probably going to think that I'm going to be unfair. You're probably going to ask yourself why you're talking to me at all in the first place. I mean, if I lay all that out at the beginning of a negotiation, it's really going to clear your head to be in the moment and for us to potentially collaborate. It doesn't solve every negotiation. It just solves so many. If you know about it, you're foolish not to use it.
You say script your first two questions, and usually your first question is designed to get a no. So when are you doing this in negotiation? Are you right? Is it before your first question? Your first questions, the ones I've heard are often very short, and I'm not hearing you do that. So when do you think about that? When do you roll that out?
Well, I'll give part of the answer that everybody hates, and then I'll follow it up. It depends. So what does it depend on? My perception of the potential negativity going in. Like, I want to clear your head so I can ask that question. It's going to be a triggering question, and I don't want anything in your way before I ask it. So probably the accusations audit, I'm probably going to have about 5 things I'm going to want to hit right off the bat. They're going to be predictable: waste of time, greedy, selfish, unfair. What are the eminently emotionally intelligent, predictable scenarios in advance? And then because I want to clear your head. When I ask that question, I want you reacting to that question and not the biases and concerns and worries that you had walking into this negotiation. Let's get in the same place and get completely present. So if it's a longer, more complicated situation that's been going on for a while, my accusations audit's going to be longer by nature of what the situation dictates. It's going to be 2 or 3 things, maybe as many as 5 they're going to apply to any situation. And then I'm going to lengthen them or decrease them depending upon the circumstance, and rarely decrease, almost always lengthen.
And Stephen, this is what you did, right? You were looking for your weaknesses and limitations. That's what you were training up in a lot of ways.
In terms of GNAR country?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. I I was definitely trying to train up my limitations and my weaknesses. A lot of it is just sort of learning how to work with it rather than fight against it, right? Peak performance aging, I think, is very much that way.
You speak about the challenge skills balance quite a bit and how this is the most important trigger for getting into flow state. I'd love for you to explain this for everybody, and I'd love for you to talk about the idea of how that challenge skills sweet spot shrinks over time. And it's a really interesting concept.
So this was one of the sort of big insights. We know old dogs can learn new tricks, but how you go about learning is an open question. And so as most people are listening, flow is an optimal state of consciousness. Flow states have triggers, preconditions that lead to more flow. The challenge skills balance is the most famous. And the shorthand version of this is all of flow's triggers. Flow only shows up with all our attention is the right here, right now. So all the triggers drive our attention into the present moment. The challenge skills balance is we pay the most attention to the task at hand, what we're doing, when the challenge slightly exceeds our skill set. You want to stretch but not snap. And if I were to explain it metaphorically, this is not science, this is just metaphor. It's about a 4 to 5% difference. So when challenge is 4 to 5% greater than your skills, that's the sweet spot. That's a little bit outside your comfort zone, but not too far. What we realized is allostatic load is the fancy term for the impact of stress over time on our physiology and our psychology. And what we started to realize is that in older adults, and older is the mindset of old, right? As soon as the voice in your head starts saying you're too old for this shit, that's when the mindset of old is setting in. And so when I say older people, I mean anybody who's succumbed to that mindset. And there's a whole bunch of biological reasons we could talk about if you want, that mindset will set up for a lot of us in our late 20s. As soon as we get stuff we want to protect and hold on to, and I've got the right job, or I've got the right partner, or that's what actually starts triggering what becomes the mindset of old. And that can happen really early on. So we figured out that instead of a 4 to 5% difference, people with the mindset of older people, it's going to be about a 1% difference. So our motto was 1 inch at a time. And when you're learning really difficult physical skills, it was start with a movement that you're 100% guaranteed you can do 100% of the time with no conscious interference, no fear, and 100% chance of execution, and build on it 1 micro movement at a time, but playful, fun fashion. This isn't repetition. This isn't deliberate practice. You're not aiming for repetition with incremental advancement. That's useful, but even better is deliberate play, where it's repetition with improvisation, right? And the difference is this. When you're doing deliberate practice, there's only one right answer. I did the exact thing I was supposed to do and got it a little bit better, right? That's the only right answer. Deliberate play, there's only one wrong answer, which is I did the exact same thing I did last time again, right? Every other answer is a right answer, so there's way more opportunity to get things right in a deliberate play scenario, which benefits learning and progress and a whole bunch of stuff like that. But it was this 1 inch at a time. And it became really funny because in our country, in the experiments, there was skiing and park skiing and park snowboarding. And at one point we ran an experiment with 20 older adults. And 1 inch at a time is really interesting. But what happens is you start making progress really fast, because it tends to be true with most adults. So when you slow people down, they go very fast. Yeah. What would happen is we then have to slow them down again, because the minute you start making progress, there's a lot of self-expectation that comes with that progress, and people would quickly go, oh, I want this challenge that's 5% greater or 6% greater, and we'd have to say, no, slow down again, and you'll get there. But some of it was about keeping people safe, but some of it is literally, if you're out of that challenge skills sweet spot, you've got too much norepinephrine in your system, and it's going to block learning. It's going to block creative problem solving. It's going to slow down fast twitch muscle response. It's going to limit the power you can generate, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a big penalty for being too anxious. And the thing about the challenge skills sweet spot and the fact that it shrinks over time is we don't notice, right? We don't notice, especially like if you were a lifelong if you behaved a certain way in your 20s, you may be behaving the same way in your 40s and not getting the same results. And that's why. It's because this is shrunken down. And if you just know that single, there's a bunch of other stuff we did, but that was really at the core of it. And it was so important.
It's an incredible concept, I think, for us to just wrap our heads around as we wrap this up. And Chris, there's so many things I would want to talk to you about, like with calibrated questions and all of these other tools, and dive into these things that we're still yet to touch on. But I'm curious, after listening to all of this, how would you challenge yourself?
Well, we want to, and please forgive me, it's going to sound harsh. I got a hard stop coming up, but I love the opportunity to help people on the other side of the world. So we're getting ready to jump into, the Dubai-based opportunities, Asia, that part of the world, and just go ahead and prove that our stuff works, that we can help people as much over there, particularly those that are perceived to be disadvantaged, women, minorities. We're going to jump into the other side of the world. That's what we're after.
Good luck doing that. It's been an absolute pleasure. As always, both of you, it's been incredible to learn from you. Chris, you've been phenomenal. It's been a gift to listen to both of you. Is there any way people can stay in touch with you or follow what you're doing, the Black Swan Group?
Yeah, you know what? I think I'm going to opt for my Instagram now. So at the FBI Negotiator, we put as much of our stuff and a bunch of our ideas up on a regular basis, and I'd love for people to follow me on Instagram.
So I'd love for you to do that as well. Thank you both for all that you do in the world and for providing so much value tonight. Thank you for being so patient with us at the start as well, everybody. Really appreciate it.
If what you've heard on Flow Research Collective Radio has been helpful, please consider doing us a solid and leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you are listening to this. Reviews help us connect to a wider audience so we can get these peak performance principles out to more people.